Hello, my name is Michael O'Hara, and I'm the Regional Administrator for the FAA Southern Region. I'm very pleased that you're able to join us for our virtual public information workshop for a proposed update to departure headings at Nashville International Airport. The Southern Region remains committed to supporting the FAA's mission of maintaining the safest and most efficient aerospace system in the world. As part of this commitment, we're proposing updated departure headings at Nashville International Airport to safely accommodate the increasing air traffic in the Nashville metropolitan area. These updates will improve lateral and vertical separation of aircraft within Nashville's airspace, ensuring the continued safety of operations, not only at Nashville International, but also for flights departing from John C. Toon and Smyrna airports. These changes are essential to meeting the region's growing aviation demand, while prioritizing safety and efficiency. The proposed headings follow paths similar to the existing ones, using multiple headings off each runway. In this workshop, we will walk you through how airspace operates at Nashville International Airport, focusing on the existing operations and what the community can expect with the proposed departure headings. We will also look at the interaction between Nashville International and the two nearby airports, John C. Toon and Smyrna. Now we have a message from the Metropolitan Nashville Airport Authority, followed by two videos that detail existing operations and the proposed headings. After the videos, we will go into a live panel question and answer session with subject matter experts from the FAA, along with our industry partners who are here to answer your questions about this project. Thank you again for your interest and participation. I hope the workshop presentations and live Q&A session provide an understanding of how these changes will enhance the safety and efficiency of airspace operations in the Nashville area. We appreciate the opportunity to share information and address your questions directly. Thank you.
Welcome to the Federal Aviation Administration Workshop. I'm Doug Krulin, President and CEO of the Metropolitan Nashville Airport Authority. It's an honor to have you here this evening. We'd like to begin by extending our gratitude to our dedicated business partners, the FAA, for hosting this important workshop. Tonight we're here to discuss the proposed FAA updates to the departure headings at the Nashville International Airport. These enhancements are designed to improve airspace efficiency and safety, to address the growing air traffic at nearby John C. Toon Airport and Smyrna Airport. We believe that public awareness is a powerful tool, and it's imperative that the public understand why the FAA is proposing these new headings. Through this workshop, our FAA partners will discuss improvements to our airport and foster a better understanding of their role in enhancing both safety and operational efficiency. Our community is at the heart of what we do, and we value the opportunity to engage with our neighbors, keeping them informed about the benefits of these new departure headings. These changes are not just technical adjustments. They represent a significant step forward by the FAA in optimizing air traffic flow, ensuring that Nashville's airspace continues to operate smoothly and safely. It is important to note that despite BNA's unprecedented growth, our departure headings have remained unchanged since the late 1980s. Allow me to share some key facts about Nashville International Airport to provide some context. Over the past decade, BNA has seen passenger numbers more than double, elevating the airport's status from a medium to a large hub. In fiscal year 2024, we welcomed over 23 million passengers through BNA's doors. BNA ranks as the #1 airport of all 5 commercial service airports in Tennessee. This summer, we will achieve a historic milestone with 114 nonstop destinations, the most in the airport's history. The airport currently handles approximately 800 daily flights, including departures, arrivals, and cargo operations. Together, both of our airports contribute a remarkable $12 billion to the state's economy, generating over $600 million in state and local taxes and supporting over 76,000 jobs in Tennessee. As we continue to grow, enhancing our infrastructure to meet the demands of our increasing passenger base is critical. We've already completed our first $1.5 billion construction program, B&A Vision 1 and 2, and we've embarked on our second $3 billion construction program, New Horizon 1 and 2, with even more exciting developments in the future. We are committed to ensuring that our airports are not only the best they can be today, but they are also primed to serve future generations with excellence, innovation, and efficiency. We deeply appreciate your participation in this evening's workshop, where you'll hear firsthand from the FAA on their airspace developments and departure heading enhancements. We extend our sincere gratitude to the FAA for hosting this meaningful session and for their continued partnership in shaping the future of the airspace. Thank you.
This video provides an overview of aircraft operations at Nashville International Airport and in the surrounding airspace. We'll talk about how air traffic operates, the complexities of airspace in the Nashville area, and the procedures air traffic controllers use to keep airplanes safely separated. Nashville is one of the fastest growing metropolitan areas in the United States. Growth of this magnitude requires an airport that can meet the needs of the ever-growing population. Nashville International Airport connects Middle Tennessee to the world with passenger and air cargo service for over 3 million people. Over the past 7 decades, the airport has continually expanded. In the past 10 years, the number of flights at the airport has grown by 118%. During the peak travel season, the airport has an average of 350 daily departures to 103 domestic and 13 international destinations. This connectivity allows local residents to fly out of Nashville instead of driving hours to catch a flight. The Nashville Airport also meets the needs of the military and is home to the 118th Air National Guard Wing and the 1/230th Air Cavalry Squadron of the Tennessee Army National Guard. Nashville International Airport was first named Berry Field in honor of Colonel Harry S. Berry. This is the origin of its airport identifier, BNA. Constructed in 1937 and first served by Eastern Airlines and American Airlines, the airport started with one runway. During World War II, it was used by the military and turned back over to civilian use in 1946. The primary responsibility of the FAA's air traffic control system is to provide the safe, orderly, and expeditious flow of air traffic. This is done by teams of FAA air traffic controllers that ensure airplanes are safely separated while maintaining the most efficient flow of air traffic. In the Nashville metro area, this means coordinating Nashville International Airport arrivals and departures with 5 busy general aviation airports, including John C. Toon and Smyrna airports. These general aviation airports serve a wide range of aircraft of varying size and performance capabilities. Smyrna Airport is also the home of the Tennessee Army National Guard. Many of the general aviation operations are small propeller training aircraft that fly a pattern around an airport to land and take off, as well as military training, law enforcement, news, medical transport, and recreational flying. It is critical for Nashville air traffic controllers to safely separate the traffic flows and different aircraft from each other. When an airport is constructed, the runways are built to align with the most common wind directions in the area. This is because aircraft take off and land into the wind to maximize performance and ensure safety. In the Nashville area, winds are variable but primarily come from the north and south. As a result, most airports in the region have primary runways that are also aligned north and south. This animation shows Nashville Airport's 4 runways, 3 parallel north-south runways and 1 crossing runway. The center parallel runway is staggered from the other 2 runways because of the surrounding terrain. Since each runway end is treated as a separate surface, there are actually 8 runway identifiers. Runway identification is based on the magnetic compass heading the aircraft is facing as it lands or takes off. For example, runway 220 is oriented with a magnetic compass heading of approximately 20 degrees in one direction and 200 degrees in the opposite direction. If you drop the 0 at the end of the compass heading, you will get 2 and 20. Parallel runways are further designated with L for left, C for center, and R for right as you approach or depart the runway. At Nashville, aircraft typically land and take off to the north or south, depending on the direction of the wind, which can shift throughout the day. Air traffic controllers generally use 1 runway for departures and 2 for arrival, which creates an efficient throughput both on the ground and in the air. This example shows aircraft taking off and landing to the north. In north flow, which happens approximately 50% of the time, aircraft typically depart on runway 2 center and land on runway 2 right and 2 left. Because runways 2 left, 20 right, and 2 center, 20 center are so closely spaced, they are not used together at the same time as arrival runways. Currently at Nashville, when an aircraft departs, it is given a heading to follow by air traffic control. This heading guides them out of the Nashville area to a published departure procedure. In this example, in north flow, typically aircraft will depart using one of the existing departure headings. The limited headings used today do not allow for diversification of flights. In the current procedures, the headings restrict the departures directly off the runway and do not standardize the aircraft route of flight to get aircraft on their way. The existing procedures also allow for aircraft to be turned to the west, which is in the vicinity of flights operating at John C. Toon Airport. The FAA is proposing new headings that incorporate additional safety measures for aircraft arriving and departing from Nashville. The multiple proposed headings departing from Nashville would allow for better efficiency off the runways by providing diverse heading choices for air traffic controllers. As a result, all aircraft would not fly over the same point, but would rather be put on divergent headings by air traffic control to get aircraft up, out, and on their ways sooner. Additionally, these proposed departure headings for both north and south operations are designed to accommodate the airport's growth and increased traffic volume. These headings can, and at times will, be utilized from each of the 3 parallel runways. For north departures, aircraft will be assigned one of 3 proposed headings, typically aligned with their destination, giving air traffic controllers greater flexibility in guiding departures out of the Nashville area. For south departures, aircraft will be assigned one of 4 proposed headings. It is important to emphasize that the proposed departure headings for both north and south operations will keep aircraft within the existing track dispersion area, which is depicted here in pink. Let's take a look at the interaction of departing aircraft from Nashville and other surrounding airports. Aircraft that depart from John C. Toon and Smyrna may be given directional instructions by air traffic controllers, who must continually keep the aircraft safely separated. For example, an aircraft departing from John C. Toon going to eastern or southern destinations must climb out in a stair-step fashion, climbing to an altitude of approximately 4,000 feet and fly at that altitude for approximately 20 miles to maintain the required lateral and vertical separation from aircraft departing from Nashville. Aircraft departing from Smyrna Airport are also held at 4,000 feet. The proposed departure headings at Nashville will help ensure the aircraft departing from the surrounding airports will meet these separation requirements. As you can see, there are many challenges to managing airspace. This project will ensure operational safety and efficiency is enhanced, as well as supporting the region's aviation needs and taking into consideration community interests where feasible. This is the first phase of updating air traffic control headings. The second phase is planned for 2026, and information about it will be posted on the FAA's Community Engagement website for Nashville.
Hello, my name is Andy Roberts, and I'm an air traffic control specialist at the Nashville International Airport Air Traffic Control Facility. I've been actively involved in air traffic for the last 18 years and here in Nashville for the last 5 years. Our facility includes the air traffic control tower that controls aircraft within approximately 10-mile range of the airport and the Nashville Terminal Radar Approach Control, or TRACON, which controls aircraft within approximately 40 miles of Nashville. Air traffic control facilities are divided into 12 levels, with one having the least amount of air traffic activity and 12 the highest. We are level 10, which means we are one of the busiest facilities in the country. When air traffic activity increases, the air traffic control facility must also modernize its capabilities. The Nashville Tower and TRACON were upgraded from level 9 to level 10 in 2023. We will walk you through the flight procedure poster boards for the proposed departure headings at Nashville International Airport. The flight tracks and proposed headings are all overlaid on a map of the surrounding area. Each board is oriented with north facing up. The name of each flight procedure is showed by an arrow on the map containing a 5-letter name. For example, this board shows departures. These are called SIDs, or Standard Instrument Departures. The spelling of each departure procedure is limited to 5 letters. For example, the spelling of the KRSTA departure is pronounced Krista. The stars on the board are locations of waypoints, which are fixed navigational points in space that are part of a published procedure. Just as with the spelling of procedures, waypoints are spelled with 5 letters. For example, the CERAH waypoint would be pronounced Sarah. The proposed flight procedure arrows are colored purple for departures. These arrows show the general area of the proposed flight procedures. Surrounding the areas are dispersed path areas in pink. These areas show the possible locations where aircraft may fly and account for different routing to avoid hazardous weather, for operational need, for safety, or to disperse departures. Aircraft flight track and dispersion information is the same for arrivals, with the flight tracks and arrival procedures called Standard Terminal Arrivals, or STARS, in orange and the dispersion area in yellow. When aircraft fly in these areas, it is typically due to a pilot receiving a heading or direction from air traffic control. A vector is a compass heading or direction assigned to an aircraft by an air traffic controller at Nashville Terminal Radar Approach Control, called TRACON, or the airport tower. The bullet points on the right side of each board provide additional details about the procedures. All flight activity shown on these boards is from September of 2024. This board shows an overview of aircraft activity in the greater Nashville area. These airports include Nashville International Airport in the center of the graphic, and John C. Toon Airport to the left, and Smyrna Airport to the right. Each airport has a control tower staffed with air traffic controllers. As this board shows, the Nashville airspace is busy. Nashville International handles mostly commercial air carrier flights and some general aviation operations. Smyrna and John C. Toon airports handle general aviation operations, which include military, corporate jets, law enforcement, medical transport, flight schools, and recreation. Each airport is designed to be able to operate independently from each other with their own airspace boundaries. Aircraft flying through each airport's airspace must communicate with air traffic controllers handling the respective airspace. In the Nashville area, winds are variable but primarily come from the north and south. Most airports in the region have primary runways that are also aligned north and south. Aircraft are assigned an initial heading or direction based on the aircraft destination, operational need, and sequencing of aircraft to maintain required separation. These initial headings are part of a procedure that air traffic assigns to provide the most efficient route to the aircraft's destination. The procedures were designed to give air traffic controllers the flexibility to manage air traffic for safety and efficiency. This series of 3 boards shows the north flow departures for Nashville International on runway 2 center. Aircraft most often use runway 2 center for departures. However, Any of the three runways may be used for departures. North flow is used when winds come from the north. These boards show the existing departure flight tracks in purple with the dispersion areas in pink. All aircraft are flying in a published departure procedure, or SID. These SIDs guide aircraft out of the Nashville area to join the en route airspace and ultimately head to their destination. This board provides a view of the broader metropolitan area. Following this board are more zoomed in boards providing additional details. When aircraft depart, they are assigned an initial heading or direction by air traffic control. Aircraft fly in this initial heading, which is typically in the general direction of their destination. This board shows a more zoomed in view of the existing north flow departure flight track for runway 2 center. Aircraft departing from Nashville International to the east must fly below aircraft landing at Nashville International. Aircraft must remain separated by 1,000 feet vertically, which means departing aircraft will fly 1,000 feet below arriving aircraft. This board shows a close-in version of existing north flow departure procedures and flight tracks and the proposed headings for runway 2 center. At this level of detail, you can see the three proposed departure headings labeled with arrows in dark blue. As aircraft depart in north flow, air traffic control will instruct the pilot to take one of three departure headings. A heading indicates which direction the aircraft will fly. These proposed headings are designed to disperse aircraft between 1 to 3 miles from the runway and can be used from any of the three runways. Aircraft flying to the north and west will fly straight for 3 miles and then turn to a heading or direction of 345 degrees. Aircraft flying to the north will fly straight on the 020 degree heading. Aircraft flying to the east and south will fly straight for a mile and then turn to a 55 degree heading. This board shows a close-in view of the existing flight tracks for the north flow arrivals preparing to land on runway 2 right or 2 left at Nashville International. Aircraft are sequenced into a stream that aligns with the runway they will land on. This sequence begins approximately 8 to 22 miles from the runway. Air traffic controllers are required to keep aircraft separated by 3 miles laterally and 1,000 feet vertically.
Hello, my name is Jeremy Lee, and I'm an air traffic control specialist at the Nashville International Air Traffic Control Tower in Tracon. I'm also the NACA, National Air Traffic Controllers Association facility rep for the Nashville Tower and Tracon Air Traffic Controllers. I have been actively involved in air traffic at the Nashville International Airport for the last 6 years. The next two boards show south flow departures from Nashville International using runway 20 center. The majority of departures use the center runway. However, all three runways are used for departures as needed for safety, efficiency, and operational needs. South flow is used when winds come from the south. These boards show the existing departure flight tracks in purple with the dispersion areas in pink. All aircraft are flying on published departure procedures or SIDs. These SIDs guide aircraft out of the Nashville area to join the en route airspace and ultimately head to their destination. When aircraft depart, they are assigned an initial heading or direction by air traffic control. Aircraft fly this initial heading, which is typically in the general direction of their destination. This board shows a more zoomed in view of the existing flight tracks and proposed departure procedures. This board shows a close-in version of existing and proposed south flow departure procedures and flight tracks for runway 20 center at Nashville International. At this level of detail, you can see multiple departure procedures labeled with arrows in dark blue. A heading indicates which direction the aircraft will fly. These four proposed headings are designed to disperse aircraft 1 mile from the runway. The headings are 160, 200, 220, 250, and will provide more tools for air traffic control to guide aircraft through the airspace. This board shows a close-in view of the existing flight tracks for south flow arrivals preparing to land on runway 20 right or runway 20 left at Nashville International. Aircraft are sequenced into a stream that aligns with the runway they will land on. This sequence begins approximately 8 miles to 22 miles from the runway. Air traffic controllers are required to keep aircraft separated by 3 miles laterally and 1,000 feet vertically. This board shows a zoomed out view of existing flight tracks for John C. Toon and the proposed North Flow 345 heading for Nashville. Under the proposed north heading, aircraft will fly further north than they do today. This proposed heading will help increase the separation between John C. Toon and Nashville international departures. We hope this presentation of flight procedures boards was helpful. Next, our panel of experts will join us for the live Q&A session.
Hello again. I'm Michael O'Hara, Regional Administrator for the FAA Southern Region, and I will be the moderator for our discussion this evening. I'd like to cover 3 procedural items before we start the Q&A. First, if you're having technical issues connecting to the workshop, you can text our tech support number anytime during the workshop at 949-478-0253. Second, our Q&A session is scheduled to last for 60 minutes. Third, we're also live streaming tonight's workshop on the FAA YouTube channel, and a recording of this workshop will be available on YouTube immediately after the live broadcast. Now I'd like to introduce our panelists. Andy Roberts is the Operations Manager of the Nashville Terminal Radar Approach Control, or TRACON, and the Air Traffic Control Tower. Jeremy Lee is an Air Traffic Control Specialist at the Nashville International Airport Air Traffic Control Tower. Andrew Peroni is an Environmental Protection Specialist in our Eastern Service Center. Trey Turner is a pilot for Southwest Airlines. Heidi Williams is a Senior Director for the National Business Aviation Association, and Adam Bouchard is Vice President of Operations for Nashville International Airport. Thank you for participating in our virtual public workshop, and we'll go ahead and get into the questions now. I want to ask our panelists a couple questions about operations and safety. First, I'd like to ask our air traffic controllers about the airspace that they manage. So when the growth that we've talked about at Nashville started, you might have just been starting your careers. Have you seen this type of growth in other locations, or can you talk about how the tower and TRACON have evolved over the past 10 to 20 years as it's become busier? Andy and Jeremy?
Sure, I can speak to the last 10 years. 10 years ago, I was at Memphis Center in the traffic management unit and started evaluating Nashville traffic because we were noticing an increase from Memphis Center. And what I started noticing is that year over year, there was a 5% growth from 2015, 2016, 5% year over year compounding on itself up until about 2020 when I arrived here in Nashville. We had a pullback in traffic during the COVID epidemic. And then after COVID and we rebounded from that, the growth here in Nashville has been tremendous, absolutely tremendous. And so I think Jeremy may have, he's been here in Nashville a little bit longer, also worked with me at Memphis Center. Jeremy, what do you think about it?
Yeah, exactly, Andy. I worked at Memphis Center for 12 years prior to this. One of the things that you look at whenever you're working in the center environment is the number of aircraft that are going to specific airports. My airport, or airspace in particular, flows into the southeastern areas for the Dallas-Fort Worth terminal area. The eastern traffic that is going into the areas western traffic going into Atlanta, and then the Charlotte area as well. And one of the things that you notice is that Nashville started to become a bigger player into that. The different airspaces that you have is you've got the tower airspace to 5 miles. Then you have the TRACON airspace up to 40, and then the en route environment works everything outside of that. that's what you're seeing in the en route environment is that the absolute volume of traffic that's seen. Nashville in particular, you started seeing airports that typically weren't being serviced by Nashville. Now they've got several aircraft that are going into the Nashville area. So we were seeing exponential growth, and as Andy said, approximately 5% a year for the last 8 to 10 years, 12 years from top of that.
All right, thank you both. And I'll ask a similar question maybe to you, Adam. From an airport perspective, do you think the folks working at Nashville International Airport could have envisioned the level of growth that has been seen in the area over maybe the past 2 decades?
Yeah, great question, Michael. So short answer is no. I think if you go back, about 20 years ago, it's not for lack of trying, but we have certainly seen a significant growth here. Two comments to make. One is that airports work really hard to try to stay ahead of those growth projections, and every 5 or so years we update something called a master plan, which does its best to look into the future about 20 years to predict passenger growth and facilities and trying to stay ahead of that. And one of the last master plan updates for the airport that got started in about 2018, the airport met that 20-year growth projection in about 6 years. So there's just been tremendous growth, which is part of the reason why we're here tonight is to have the conversations around making sure that we're building not only to what we're seeing today, but more importantly, establishing a good foundation for the future.
Thanks, Adam. And although I live in Atlanta, I'm certainly familiar with the Nashville area, some of the traffic that's there, and I've spent a good bit of time there. But I know from my perspective here in Atlanta, I can see growth kind of on the surface. You think about cars on the highway or people in the terminal, and there's just a significant amount of increase. The change is happening. Same kind of change that we're seeing on the ground is happening in the air, and we need the infrastructure, if you will, to support that. So some of the things that passengers see, some of the things that you see from the ground, things that we refer to as airways. But there are, there's a safety aspect to how we handle growth like that. And I guess I'll open that up to anyone on the panel that wants to address that. But how have you integrated safety into your various processes as you've looked at accommodating the growth that's come to the Nashville area? Maybe looking to see if anybody's off mute. Adam, you want to go first?
Yeah, Michael, happy to. I view safety as it's an ecosystem. Everybody's got a role to play, and although the airport authority doesn't control aircraft in the air or on the ground, we have a role to play, making sure that our facilities can safely and efficiently accept aircraft, and we've got facilities to serve our customers, both from a terminal and a roadway perspective. And then, of course, supporting the important work that the FAA does to make sure that the airways and the airspace is safe and efficient, not just for BNA, but also John C. Toon Airport, which falls under the authority of the Metropolitan Nashville Airport Authority. But it is mission number one. And we're working diligently, obviously, here tonight with the FAA, but just as an airport in the places that we can control, making sure that we're meeting the needs of our customers and passengers today. But as I alluded to earlier, more importantly, making sure that we're building properly for the future growth that Nashville and the airport is expected to see.
Oh, great, Adam. Thanks so much. Andy, from an air traffic perspective?
Yeah, from here at the facility, our air traffic facility, we have created and implemented several new operational positions to help reduce the number of airplanes any one air traffic controller is working at any given time. So to put that in perspective, in 2016 time that we were talking about before, the average daily traffic that Nashville approach control would work was approximately 650 operations. Today, that's approximately a little over 1,400 operations. So it's essentially doubled, slightly more than doubled. And so in order to ensure the safety of that vast increase in air traffic, we need to be able to split that airspace up a little bit into smaller pieces. And so we've implemented several new positions, and then what we're talking about tonight is also a big part of the safety and implementation and growth into the future. Jeremy, you can probably cap us off with that.
Yeah, I think it's essential for us to reevaluate on a yearly basis or however often for our safety procedures. A couple of things that we've done is had more of a standard runway operation in the way that we do things at Nashville. With that being said, we do have our, as we said in the video, we have our John Tune, our Smyrna traffic as well, and that's just an increase in exponentially. Especially John Tune got an operational control tower approximately 2 years ago. And so what we've seen is we've seen the need for diverging headings off of Nashville to deconflict with any of the traffic that's going in and out of John Tune, just to make this airspace safer. And with the volume of airspace that we have, or with the volume of traffic that we have going in and out of the airspace, we need to make sure that this area is the safest airspace that we can have. Michael?
Thank you both. From an operator perspective, Heidi or Trey, anything to add? Heidi?
Sure. Happy to jump in, Michael. Thanks. And I wholeheartedly concur with what my colleagues have said here. Adam mentioned that ecosystem, right? And safety is paramount to all of us that are part of that ecosystem. I think we're passionate about it, but I think we also recognize it takes collaboration amongst all of the users in that ecosystem, from the airport to the operators to the air traffic controllers and our service providers. So I think this type of outreach and education and talking and engaging with the community is really critical, but we have been doing that from the very start of this, right? Where we are partners together with all of us having the number one goal of safety of the system.
Thanks, Heidi. Trey?
Yes, thank you, Michael. And just echoing what the others have said about safety being the primary focus of our operations and our interlinked operations through not only the airport, but air traffic and the users of the airport. We keep, at least at Southwest, we keep safety as the top focus item for our operational philosophy. And to Heidi's point, it comes through these collaborations, it comes through communication, and the changes that get made. It's not just the FAA that conducts safety risk assessments. We as the operators also conduct safety risk assessments and run any changes. It could be on the ground, at the gate, the ramp area, through taxi, and then the rest of the phases of flight. But we run these through our safety management protocols and identify risks, potential hazards, and so forth, and find solutions to mitigate. And we couldn't do that without the partnership that we have with these various entities that bring about the ecosystem. To Adam's point, I really like that how we call it an ecosystem. That's exactly what it is. And we appreciate our partnerships, and we appreciate the abilities and the tools that we're given to keep flight safety as the primary focus area.
A great answer. Thanks everyone for that. And it's so true that no one of us owns enough of it to do it ourselves. We have to work together. So whether it's the pilots, the airlines, looking to meet the demand of passengers or cargo traffic, whether it's the airport looking to build the infrastructure on the surface, the runways, the terminals, as Adam said, the roadways, getting people in and out of the airport, but also following some of the standards that FAA designs, and then the FAA air traffic controllers who are responsible for providing guidance to the pilots to maintain that safe separation as they're out on the taxiways and runways of the airport. So it's a complex system. It requires everyone to work together. And as all of your answers alluded, we have to be on the same page. We have to be studying change and be diligent about that so that we make sure that what we're doing tomorrow is at least as safe as what we're doing today. So thanks again for the discussion on that. Let me keep us moving here. Another question. The video said this is the first step. What else is the FAA doing to operations here? Will anything change with arrivals? So I can start with that, Andy, and maybe see if you or Jeremy want to add anything. But we did say that we're working on a near-term implementation to change departure headings. And then down the road, we're looking at the introduction of performance-based navigation that gives us a higher level of precision and predictability, which is also a driver for safety. And we'll probably chat more about that from an air traffic perspective. But one of those is near term. One of those before it's implemented, you'll hear more information. And I think we touched on that in the video as well. So more information will be shared as we get closer to knowing how those performance-based navigation or PBN procedures will be designed, but that's several months down the road. I think in the video it referenced 2026 or in that time frame. Andy?
Yes, excuse me. That's exactly right, Michael. And to answer the question directly, I'm sorry, it sounded like someone else was. To answer the question directly, what we're talking about tonight, the focus item is the departure headings. And the answer is no. The departure headings will not affect anything that has to do with arrivals into Nashville. And as Michael alluded to, several months down the road, we have the PBN, which is performance-based navigation. That is lateral guidance. And at that point, arrivals will be affected by altitudes. Their altitudes will be higher, so further from the ground for a longer period of time. But for the time being, for what we're focused on right now and talking about just the departure headings, they will not affect arrivals.
Andy, just a quick follow-up. Can you share about the timing we're looking at for implementation of the proposed heading changes?
I believe we're looking at April 1st, if I'm not mistaken. I think that was our target, April 1st.
Right. So on or around then. It may not be that exact day, but
right.
All right, very good. All right, I'll take us to another question. Thanks for that. Maybe this is more of a comment. Please make sure there is no increase in flights over Crockett Park area in Brentwood or the intersection of Crockett Road and Raintree Parkway. The flights are already extremely loud in that area on the approach. Let me see if anybody wants to comment on that. Andy?
I can jump in on that. Excuse me. The number of flights, we don't control the number of flights, and that area is not far from where I live. I live about 10 miles south of Nashville also. And that area is, as you saw in the video, the final approach course in a north configuration. When airplanes are landing to the north, when the wind's out of the north, that area is on the final approach course for the parallel runways at Nashville. That hasn't changed. Those runways haven't changed. That's not new. Hopefully down the line, as we were talking about the PBN stuff, those aircraft will be higher. So the hope would be that there would be less intrusion from that. But in the time being, what we're talking about tonight, the departure headings should not impact you in that area. And I can tell you, I'll just say this, I live there and I don't want any more noise over my house either. So I understand.
Thanks, Andy. I don't know if anyone else needs to comment on that, but I don't see anybody else jumping in there. And appreciate the comment kind of with the geographic reference. So thanks to the person who asked that. I'll keep us moving. How are the proposed headings different than the current headings? Maybe we can pull up one of our display boards for that one. And Andy and Jeremy, maybe you could walk us through. I know you did that up front a little bit, but we'll see what they give us here. Looks like we have the north flow departure. So maybe you could chat a little bit about that, Andy or Jeremy.
Jeremy, you take that one. Go for it.
Sure. This is showing us departing runway 2 center. A lot of the times we do depart runway 2 left. And in this heading here, currently in our current state, all of the departures off of Nashville will give a runway heading. And this is part of our Part 150 that we have off runway 2 left. So what this does is it gives us additional headings of the 345 once we get 3 miles north of Nashville, and then the 055 heading as well. This heading will be off of runway 2 left, runway 2 center, and runway 2 right. So it does give us more opportunities or more options for initial headings off departure. And if we can switch over to south, I don't know if we've got that available real. In the south configuration, in its current state as of today, we had they turned the aircraft to a 275 heading. And what that does is it puts aircraft closer to the John Tune departure release area. And so the 250 heading, what that does is it gives us a little more space on the John Tune departures. The 220 heading that is currently being used is the same one that we're proposing to use for our new headings. The 200 heading, the 200 heading, is slightly different than what we use today, which is a 180 heading. That also gives us that 160 heading off departure. The 200 and the 160 heading are headings that we had to consider using because the 140 heading is what we use now, and 140 takes us right over Smyrna in the congested airspace over Smyrna with the GA traffic. So the 160 heading gives us more latitude off the east side in the Smyrna area as well. Andy, you got anything to add to that?
I was just going to mention the 250 heading. Currently, what we use is a 275, just like what Jeremy was talking about going eastbound towards Smyrna. We currently use a 275 heading off of runway 20 center. And that is, well, you can see it's 25 degrees closer or to the north, which puts airplanes closer to the arrival departure corridor of John Tune Airport. So we wanted to create more space there, build in a more margin for error, more safety, if you will. And that's what that 250 heading came from. And as Jeremy said, the 220 heading is not new. The 200 heading is a 20-degree difference in what we previously were doing. And the 160 heading is a 20-degree difference in what we were previously doing. So relatively minor changes there. Additional headings, the 200 is an additional. So we have 4 options here, which hopefully will reduce the number of airplanes flying over the same place, spread them out a little bit more, and less frequency over each area of the Nashville area.
Great point. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Jeremy. And I think it underscores the job, if you will, of air traffic controls, not just at BNA, right? It's all of the aircraft in the airspace. And given the growth that we've talked about, maybe primarily at BNA, we've also seen it at Smyrna and John Tune. So you're really just trying to keep the traffic separated safely. So maybe I'm stating the obvious, so I'll keep us moving. And thanks for getting us the graphics to help on that. All right, another question. Will there be a trial session for the new headings where we can give feedback on how the new headings impact the community? Andy, or Andrew, I'm sorry, I'll come to you on that, and I'm happy to address maybe how we can get feedback through our noise portal after you give your answer.
Okay, great. Thank you, Michael. The answer is no. We are not planning to do a trial for the headings, primarily because we did conduct a noise study which didn't show any reportable or significant noise, and also because the PBN procedures are going to be following fairly shortly. So didn't really feel there would be time to do the training and all the things necessary to get input from the public and make changes on these headings. I think you were going to mention the noise complaint portal, so I'll let you provide
happy
that
to do that. And to clarify, we didn't see any significant change in noise, right? That doesn't mean there isn't noise in Nashville, but these proposed headings don't introduce any significant or reportable change. Andrew, let me make sure I got that right. But
yeah, yes, you did.
Okay. So between what we're doing today, what we're proposing, that's the analysis. Thanks. And FAA, even in our office, the Office of the Regional Administrator and our Air Traffic Service Center, we work pretty diligently to keep our finger on the pulse of where there are community concerns. We do work both with congressional inquiries, but also noise inquiries that come into the FAA. And if you want to learn more about noise from an FAA perspective and or submit a noise inquiry or a noise complaint, you can go to the FAA. You can essentially search for FAA Southern Region, and then within that site, search for noise portal, or just go to fa.gov and search for noise portal, and you'll get a link to not only that portal, but additional information on what we're doing to reduce noise as it relates to aircraft, et cetera, aircraft design, future, things like that. And also our community engagement page that has specific links on specific locations, including places like Nashville. So hopefully that's helpful. Let me keep us moving. The next question, why is runway 1331 not used for overnight noise abatement as recommended in the most recent Part 150 study? That may be a tag team. Adam, are you ready to jump on that one? Maybe we'll
Sure.
ask Andy as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to at least a part of that and then let air traffic locally speak to it. So to start with, Part 150 studies, let's maybe start there. So the Part 150, for those that aren't familiar with that, back in the late 1970s, the FAA established a consistent federal framework for airports to assess noise impacts on their community, and that's called a Part 150. The airport lasted a full Part 150 update quite a number of years ago, and then periodically has been noise exposure map updates, which has carried forth the recommendation that goes back to the late 1980s about runway 1331 being noise preferred. Part 150 studies, with very rare exceptions, are all voluntary measures. There's no requirements that pilots follow it. The airport does not assign runways for departure, so I'll let FAA chime in on that. But certainly from an operational perspective, there's been significant growth in flight activity from when that recommendation was first made, both in terms of aircraft type, frequency, and times of day that flights operate. And if you look at a map, the three parallel runways are certainly the most efficient flow of aircraft operations because you can land and depart concurrently in some respects, depending on configuration. With respect to runway 1331, it transects all three of those runways, two of them essentially physically and one of them in airspace, which greatly reduces throughput. And I think that's a great segue to hand off to air traffic to speak to some of the challenges with using 1331 in the evening hours.
Sure, I can run with it from there. From the air traffic perspective, aside from what was mentioned in the video previously, aircraft like to depart and arrive into the wind. Just that's a safety feature. It's a safety function of what runway aircraft arrive and depart. Additionally, runway 13 does not possess a precision approach procedure. 31 does. So now we're talking about one of the options has a precision approach procedure. And then, as Adam mentioned, the fact that the runway crosses either the ground path or the flight path of all three parallel runways. All of that stuff combined together reduces the likelihood of any aircraft wanting to use that runway. Even if it's assigned, they will likely request one of the parallel runways, which often happens. So essentially, I would say that it's a function of efficiency, safety, and aircraft performance characteristics, so on and so forth. It just doesn't always make sense.
Thank you, Adam and Andy, for that. And I know in some of our discussions, there's runway availability, there's the winds that you both touched on. There can just be volume. So, Andy, you touched on it in your last answer. Essentially, if you're on the 1331, you're kind of taking three other runways out of the mix for all practical purposes. And so if your traffic demand is for more than one runway or has a need where you're just going to be stacking up if you're using one runway, that basically pushes you into the parallels. So I think I said that accurately, but hopefully that makes sense to the audience.
You did. I think that makes sense also.
All right, let me keep us moving. Great questions coming in. Another question, is this proposed change going to add more air traffic going over the south of Nashville? There's already an increase in traffic. I think I read that right. Jeremy or Andy, do you want to start with that?
Sure, I can start with that. This may be an Adam question too, especially for the proprietary information from Southwest or Trey and them. I can answer this question as well. But the change itself is not going to add any more aircraft into Nashville. There's been a steady increase in air traffic. We've already talked about that into and out of the Nashville area for the past several years. But the continued growth is still going to be there. One of the things that the headings do is they add to the SIDS and stars that are being created. The SIDS are going to be standard instrument departures, as Andy alluded to, with the stars, which is the arrivals into Nashville. Those proposals, the SIDS in particular, are eventually going to get the aircraft higher faster. And so the noise at that point will become less noticeable once the aircraft get higher. Adam, would you like to follow up with that?
Yeah, Jeremy, I think maybe the only thing I could add there, as far as just general increase in traffic by a host of different rules and laws, we can't restrict aircraft operations in terms of time of day or the frequency of flights in terms of what a carrier may choose to fly here at BNA. So as far as just a general increase in traffic, that's not something the airport's able to regulate in any way.
I would also add that the question was, again, is the proposed change going to add more air traffic going over the south of Nashville? No. And now I've lost my train of thought. I had a really good answer for this. Sorry about that. The change.
So Andy, I'll jump in while you're thinking.
Go
But
ahead.
I mean, generally the airport operates in roughly a 50-50 split of north versus south. And this
That's
project
exactly,
wouldn't.
you nailed it. That's
There you
exactly
go.
what I was going to
So,
talk about. Thank you.
so
So
I'll let you
why?
finish it up, but maybe
Sure, I
that's helpful.
appreciate it. So any more traffic over the south of Nashville is, in essence, like we were talking about in the video, like I mentioned in one of the previous answers, or about 1331, aircraft like to take off into the wind and arrive into the wind. That is about a 50-50 split, not exactly, but approximately a 50-50 split here in Nashville, just due to the nature of our weather in the greater Nashville area. So not anymore. These procedures don't add anything additional to any given area around the Nashville area.
Good tag team. Thank you. Thank you both, or thank you all.
Thank you for your help. Thank you for your help.
Michael, I could add just a
It's-
little bit of context.
Go
to
ahead, Trey.
that.
Thanks.
Like, yes. So one of the things that's really interesting is that when it comes to aircraft noise and the way we like to operate the airplanes in the runway and the terminal environment, is that typically if we can operate the airplanes the way we prefer to, and what was mentioned earlier was that they want to get the airplanes up and out as fast as possible, that the efficiency of the airplanes and noise reductions is typically synonymous, symbiotic, if you will. So the way they're designing these procedures to get the air carriers up and out faster is going to reduce noise signatures, reduce CO2 emissions, and have that joint effort, if you will. And so we as the carriers like that as well. We definitely, as an air carrier, do not want to adversely impact our communities or our customers that live in the areas surrounding the airport. But this applies both to departures and arrivals. So if procedures are designed to be more efficient, and what was discussed earlier was PBN, or performance-based navigation, typically offers more efficiencies, then we will see some noise reductions, which also equates to lower CO2 emissions and fuel burn from the airline side. And so it just highlights that joint effort, right, where air traffic is working with the carriers and working with the communities in order to make it a safer, that's first, but safer, more efficient NAS. So, Michael, I hope that kind of added a little bit of context about how it's a joint effort.
No, I think so. And it helps put into perspective, I mean, even if the winds drive you in a south flow, it doesn't, your departures to the south, it doesn't mean that Southwest or another carrier isn't still flying to Boston or Chicago. So if you think about it, the sooner you get aircraft on their path, it's going to be a shorter flight path over the Nashville community as a general statement. If they're flying further south, 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 and then turning, it's just a longer flight path, which you mentioned, Trey, from a CO2 perspective, but it's also more ground track miles over homes and residences. So just another way to view that. Thanks for the tag team there as well. The next question's a little bit different flavor. Adam, I'll see if you want to jump in on this, but can you discuss plans and timeline for runway expansion at BNA?
Sure. So the only active expansion, if you will, that the airport's actively going through an environmental impact study right now is the extension of one of our runways, which is designated runway 20 right, 2 left. That's our far west side parallel runway. That is a very lengthy process from an environmental review standpoint. So there is no imminent extension of that runway, but it's under active environmental review for possible extension in future years. As far as expansion of physical runway pavement, there's no forward-looking plans to do that. However, the airport is in the process of doing, I mentioned this earlier on in the evening, a master plan update, which is going to look at all of our facilities, runways included, looking downrange again about 2 decades, which will then outline potential needs in future years based off of various growth. But the potential extension of the West Parallel is the only active project that we're looking at through the environmental impact study right now.
Great. That's helpful information. Thanks, Adam.
Yes, sir.
All right, I may take this next one, unless you want to jump in, Andrew, but I won't put you on the spot. So, are these headings already locked in? And I would say yes, the near term, we're calling them proposed headings, but essentially we're prepared to implement those, as we mentioned previously, around the April or early April 1st timeframe. And we're working to introduce those headings. We feel that it's important for the community to understand what's going on in the airspace above your homes, above your businesses, above your places of interest. And we do expect these to be implemented in the near term. As we've said, though, there's follow-on activity that we expect with the performance-based navigation, and that design work's not complete. So feedback that we get, comments that we get in a workshop like this, or questions, that helps us understand where the interests and questions and or concerns lie with the community. So short term, yes, I don't normally use the term locked in, but they're set and ready for implementation. But other phases down the road certainly have not reached that level of finality. Moving on, how can we expect the proposed headings to impact our daily lives? There was a test done in the summer of 2024 where there was a significant increase in air traffic noise, with flights flying directly over our house multiple times an hour from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. I'm assuming that will not be the case, but should we expect anything similar?
I can take
Andrew?
this one, Michael.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. The proposed headings are really expected to increase the efficiency, which, as you mentioned earlier, hopefully will reduce time that airplanes are in the air flying around the Nashville community. But the goal is to increase the efficiency in operation and disperse aircraft headings. This should allow for more diverse flight paths and enhance the airspace and proficiency of the operations.
All right. Thanks, Andrew. And maybe the follow-on or the next question is for you as well. What type of environmental review was done for this project, and what were the results of the noise study?
Sure, thank you. The FAA conducted an environmental review that's required by the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. And I'll go into a little bit of detail about NEPA because maybe not everybody on the meeting or the call has extensive background, but there are 3 levels of environmental review under NEPA. The FAA determined that a categorical exclusion was the appropriate level of review because the proposed headings do not individually or cumulatively have significant environmental impacts. The environmental review we conducted included a noise screen using FAA's approved software, the Aviation Environmental Design Tool, or AEDT, which determined that there would be no significant noise impacts as a result of the proposed heading changes.
All right, very good. Thanks, Andrew. All right, we have a question. Please delineate where the BNA jurisdiction or maybe MNAA jurisdiction ends and where the FAA begins at the Nashville airport. And I don't know, I might ask Adam and Andy, I'll probably chime in, but maybe think about it from both like an aircraft perspective, but also from a passenger perspective, if that makes sense. And I'll be happy to chime in. Adam, do you want to start?
Sure, absolutely. So, short answer is the FAA really actually regulates the airfield, which is the runways and taxiways under a different division than air traffic, that establishes standards of safety. So the airport's responsible for meeting those standards. We're inspected routinely to that end. We maintain the airfield to be compliant, meeting or exceeding all safety standards. But then when it comes to the physical movement of aircraft, again, whether it's pulling into a gate or taking off on a runway, and what runway is used and what direction that airplane travels, whether it's arriving or departing, is solely the responsibility of the FAA. I hope that sort of answers it. And Andy, I'll hand it off to you to maybe take it from there as far as the management of aircraft and airspace and even aircraft movements on the ground.
Jeremy, you'll need to help me out here because apparently my brain's not working according to the last question. But yeah, as Adam said, anything on what we call the movement area in air traffic, which is any taxiway, not necessarily the ramp where airplanes may be de-iced or refueled or things of that nature, but anything when your aircraft is moving on a taxiway, a runway, or in the air around the airport, that is the FAA's responsibility. The airport itself, to just kind of go off of what Adam said or add to it, they own the airport. They give us concrete to work with, and the FAA air traffic uses the concrete that's made available to us to safely control the aircraft around those areas. Jeremy, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you hit it on. I think you hit it correctly. I don't have anything to add.
It sounded good to me. I saw Trey nodding, so I didn't know if anybody else had anything to add. I think that delineation of kind of apron, there is a ramp control that takes care of some of that de-icing and movement as the airlines are, if you think about kind of queuing up to enter into the movement area, and then so that's ramp control. That's not FAA, but the control tower takes them from there as you're out on the taxiway, kind of getting in line to depart and in the runway and obviously in the air to your destination. That's all FAA air traffic control. To be fair, there's also a pretty close relationship between the airport and the FAA on the design of, for example, taxiways or runway extensions, the navigation aids that are on the ground that guide the aircraft. So sometimes it's hard to peel that apart, but there are distinct roles, and hopefully that's at least enough information for whoever was interested with the question. But we work pretty closely together, but we each have our roles and lanes to work with. Okay. Here's one. Good evening. Thanks for your time. Could you please advise when the next noise exposure study will begin? Adam, I'm probably going to look to you on that one.
Sure, absolutely. So two ways to look at noise exposure. The Part 150 process that we talked about a bit earlier has two parts. There's a noise exposure map update, which the airport has routinely updated about every 5 years. Those maps generally take a previous 12-month period to give a kind of a current assessment of noise exposure based off of the federal standards established under Part 150, and then it looks out, projects about 5 years. And so we're coming up on an update to that here pretty soon. The last maps were updated in 2020. As far as the broader Part 150 study, we've been having active conversations with the FAA on the appropriate time to do that. As I mentioned earlier, we're in the middle of an environmental impact study for a potential runway extension. And so until that work is further along, we're not able to start that process, but we're certainly talking to the FAA on when it makes the most sense and is appropriate for the airport to look at a broader Part 150 study update.
That makes sense. And again, the relationship between us is between FAA and the airport. We don't we don't do the 150 study, but if you think about the tracks that you're looking at, again, that's the tracks that air traffic control was guiding, and so it's all connected. The ecosystem, is that your word, Heidi? Um, all right. Thanks, Adam. Next question or comment. The flight diagrams that were shown during the introductory videos were very vague, meaning out of focus or fuzzy. So first of all, apologize for that. It was difficult to discern our particular neighborhoods. Can we have access to more clear, readable diagrams? Um, I do know that we'll post the recorded version of tonight's workshop, and hopefully when that comes through, there won't be any bandwidth issues or things that would make that difficult to read. I I can take that as an offline note to see if we're able to post the charts. I know we've done that before, but to post those charts in their original form. So the session's being recorded, live streamed, and that'll continue to be available. And one place you can start is to look at that recording and see if that's better. Um, I'll do that as well. We'll kind of follow up if there's any issue with the graphics that we're able to see there. We'll look at posting those separately. Thanks for the feedback on that. Moving on, when is the lateral runway used? I'm a little confused by that question. I live east of the airport, and we have a huge increase in low flying planes within the last 6 months. What are you doing to address this? So, am I missing that? Jeremy or Andy or Adam, do you get?
At Nashville, 1331 during the daytime operation, we're just not going to use it. It's currently, the runway itself has been closed for an extended period of time. This question, based on the location of where this question comes from, about 7 miles to the east, uh, it has the potential of the aircraft in the vicinity of Smyrna. Smyrna's had a long-term runway closure of runway 1 and 19. So the departure and arrival airport into Smyrna has been their northeast to or northwest to southeast runway, which is runway 14. So not knowing in particular where this question came from and where they lived, I would assume that you're probably seeing the bulk of the traffic coming from the Smyrna airport. Whenever they're using runway 14, that will put aircraft into positions where Smyrna typically doesn't happen. But Smyrna Airport is a very busy, congested airport for general aviation traffic. And they do a lot of pilot training in that Smyrna Airport. You're also going to see helicopter movement into and out of the Smyrna Airport, whether it be going into the hospital in that area or the news media as well. And then just pilot training in general. Heidi can probably speak to the pilot training in general, what they would do out to the east, but that seems to be where that would occur.
Jeremy, just to add, I guess there's a part two that may help give a better mental picture. So they're saying I'm 7 miles from the airport, and they also said they live east of the airport. So over in that area, about that distance, yet I can hear engine noise, and they're asking are baffles being used to address this? So I
can't answer that last part, but I would imagine 7 miles is probably around where that Smyrna Airport is. Their final approach and their traffic patterns for Smyrna.
All right, I appreciate your help with that. That one wasn't crystal clear. I will reiterate that the headings we're talking about tonight don't apply to the 1331 if that is part of the question at VNA, but it sounds like Jeremy was addressing kind of some of the other traffic from Smyrna in that area east of VNA. So hopefully that got it. If you want to follow up with a question or if we missed the mark, please feel free to do so. I'll move on.
Michael,
Yes.
before you
Hey,
move
Trey.
on, I can add just a little bit of that from an operator perspective. We've talked about the winds and how aircraft like to land and depart into the wind. There's some distinctions there that we might need to work through. it's not just pilot preference on whether we're landing with a crosswind or not. Our pilots are not shy about landing with a crosswind at all, but there are limitations with the airplane that come into effect. Like it's, for example, in Southwest case, uh, just a good day, clear day, no clutter or contamination like rain or snow or anything on the runway. We have a limitation of 35 knots as a maximum crosswind. If the wind is pushing that, we'll probably need that runway 1331 for an operational need. If the runway becomes wet, the crosswind limits for the the north-south runways start to go down in crosswind limitations depending on how much either water or contamination such as snow or whatever is on that runway. And so these are actual published limitations of the airplane that at that point it becomes a regulation and something that we have to adhere to in order to, again, keep safety first and keep our customers in the backs of the airplane safe. That would precipitate the need to use that runway. And that's just from an operator standpoint. It's dispassionate and just following the airplane flight manual, essentially.
Great info. Thanks, Trey. And Heidi, did I miss something that you wanted to add?
No, I think everything's been captured. We're good. Thanks, Michael.
All right, very good. All right. Let me keep us moving on. Over the past year or so, I've monitored the KBNA ATIS, which is the kind of the broadcast of information for air traffic. It seems that there are only two primary configurations, except on rare occasions. When departing in the northern direction, takeoffs depart on runway 2 left and arrive on 2 center and 2 right. And when departing in the southern direction, takeoffs departing on 20 center and arriving 20 left, 20 right. This results in almost constant traffic flow to the north of 20 right and 2 left. Why are other runway configurations not used, and why is runway 20 right not used for southern takeoffs? Although you mentioned that runway 2 center is primary for northern flow takeoffs, this seems surprising. For example, today all-day takeoffs have been on runway 2 left, according to the ATIS. This seems consistent with most days I check ATIS. Utilizing more runway configurations would relieve some of the almost constant traffic that happens north of 20 right, 2 left. Andy, or
Sure. I
Trey,
can,
if you want to chime in.
I
Go ahead,
think
Andy.
myself, Jeremy, Adam, Trey, everybody can probably speak a little bit to this. I'll try and start us off and see where we go and what we learn. As far as standard runway configurations, that's important for safety. Changing things up every day, it's having a different operation. You kind of want a little bit of routine in an air traffic operation, so that it reduces mistakes. Honestly, you can have a little bit of expectation, predetermined expectation about how the flow of traffic is going to be. That's one part. Another part would be actual efficiency of the airport, throughput of the airport. The airplanes that are in the air want to get on the ground. And the airplanes that are on the ground want to get in the air as quickly as possible, and they don't want to burn a lot of gas on the ground. So if you think about, say, a Southwest, where Southwest Airlines parks on the ramp at BNA, in order for them to taxi to runway 20 right, it's about 3 times the distance as the taxi for them to go to 20 center for departure. And for, let's say, Delta Airlines that parks on the north part of the terminal, for them to taxi over to runway 20 left, that's about twice the distance as it takes them to get from the north ramp to 20 center. Sometimes those do depart off of 20 right, depending on conditions. But that's the general idea, is the flow and efficiency, throughput of the actual airport, and then having some consistency within that. And I'll pass it off to whoever would like to pick it up from there.
I can jump in, Andy, if you'd like. So with that, we look at the ATIS every time we pre-flight the airplane, and we see what's in the configuration. And there's multiple safety touches to what Andy was alluding to. The one on the air traffic controller side, and then one on the flight deck side. And so for the air traffic controller side, Andy, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm pretty confident that your work group and your controllers having standard configurations and operations, both for your ground controllers and your tower controllers, and I realize that they rotate, but you need to know and have a very high comfort level with how traffic is not only departing, but arriving and taxiing on that airport. And I want you to have, we as people that operate the airplanes want you to have that comfort factor and that confidence in the system. And it is a very intricate system. And that segues right into the second safety point is for us that taxi the airplanes. And I know it's, taxiing is a critical phase of flight by no stretch of the imagination. And shorter taxi times is not about fuel or efficiency of the airline so much as it is the more taxi that you have to build into an airport, a Part 139 airport like this that has complex runway and taxiway geometries, the more runway crossings you have to incur. Those things all become additive conditions into the overall safety piece. So the less taxiing that we have to do as an airline, the safer the operation is. And that, adds to the ecosystem. I'm still going to use that, but it adds to the overall safety picture of what we're trying to achieve. Now, runway crossings happen. There are, different airport configurations everywhere we go, and we're trained to deal with that. But the realities are the more simplistic that we can make the system overall increases flight safety significantly, in my opinion.
Michael, I guess the only thing I would add, just tapping into what Trey just mentioned, is I think overall we're all looking at ways to reduce risk, right? And reducing risk in that airport and runway environment is increasing safety. And that's what all of us are doing from whatever seat we sit in. It's looking at that risk profile, doing everything we can to reduce that risk and enhance safety.
Well said. Thanks, Heidi. And I don't really have anything to add, but I know we have a kind of a broad spectrum in the audience. So I said ATIS, Automatic Terminal Information Service. So it's not air traffic control info, but think weather, airport environment info, and it's just a broadcast that's playing for airport users. In case someone's wondering what we were asking. All right, very good. All right, there's a question. When will these proposed departure flows go into effect? I know we touched on that, but just to repeat, we're targeting on or around April 1st for the proposed departure headings, with a subsequent effort perhaps into early next year on some performance-based navigation procedures. That second part is not the heart of the focus of today's discussion, so more to come on that in the coming months. All right, there's another question that's come in. How can neighborhoods submit noise complaints when actual flight paths aren't being respected? This happens today, and I'm worried that what's agreed on won't be observed. What's the process for neighborhoods to be heard moving forward? There may be a few of us on that. There are a couple different places that noise complaints can be submitted. But as these headings are approved and implemented, any new noise questions, comments, or complaints noise inquiries, if you will, can be submitted to on the FAA side via our FAA noise complaint portal. And again, you can go to www.faa.gov and search for noise portal or noise complaint portal. And it should take you to a part of the website that gives you information on noise, but also says, here's where I want to file a complaint. So that information's there. Just search on FAA.gov for noise portal or noise complaint portal, and you'll find that link. So there are a number of factors in terms of the comment about actual flight paths not being respected. So every plane's not going to fly over the blue arrow. I think that's a fair comment. So Andy, I don't want to get too deep, or Andrew in the analysis, or even Adam in the perspective of the complaints to the airport. So I'm probably going to tap some of you on that. But there are a lot of factors that affect where aircraft fly, and as Heidi just touched on from a safety perspective, our collective goal is to ensure the safe separation of those aircraft, but that also includes avoiding things like severe weather, not necessarily right there at the BNA airport, but if certain headings or gates are closed off to the north or to the south of the airport, that can affect the operation. And we're not going to send people on a path that they can't continue on. So I'm not an air traffic controller. I probably just went too deep on that. Andy, you want to take it? And I'm going to call in a couple others.
Sure, I'll speak specifically to today. Meteorological conditions can affect where airplanes will fly. It's not just what air traffic assigns them. And we have to be cognizant of where reports are of moderate severe turbulence and icing. All three of those items were present today north of Nashville, north and northwest of Nashville. Airplanes don't want to fly through icing. Airplanes don't want to fly through severe turbulence or moderate turbulence, for that matter, if they can avoid it. And so some of the deviations from what might be the norm are very likely due to those meteorological conditions that we saw today.
Thunderstorms can also play in heavily to that. If we're lined up on the runway and our radar is showing some severe weather, that could also present something that needs to be mitigated on departure. But I just thought I'd throw that in there. Icing's another concern, of course.
That's helpful, Trey. Andy?
I was just going to keep going on what I was talking about there. I was actually sitting next to our very own Jeremy Lee today when he took that one of the severe turbulence reports that we had, just to bring it closer to home.
Adam, I'm going to come to you in just a second. I want to give a more specific website, but I mentioned you can, on the FAA side, you can go to faa.gov and search. We have what we call the Aviation Noise Complaint and Inquiry Response, or ANSWER. We love our acronyms, ANCIR. If you go to faa.gov/answer, ANCIR, that'll take you straight to our answer service portal that again has some information, but I'm reading it as I speak. Click here to submit your message to the answer portal. That'll get you on your way. So if you're having any trouble finding the FAA path, do that. Adam, anything you want to add from how to let the team at MNAA know if they want to let the airport know about noise concerns?
Absolutely. So the airport's long maintained for many, many years a phone number for residents to call that's available on flynashville.com. Within the next week or two, we're hopeful to roll out a more simplified online form for residents to use to file noise complaints and noise concerns with the airport. That'll make it easier for residents, and it'll also help us be more responsive because that system tags in the likely flight of a specific concern. So we're certainly looking forward to making that added tool available for the community. Again, for now, it's a phone number. If you just search noise complaints or noise on flynashville.com, that will bring you to that page, and that same page will be updated here very soon with that online complaint form.
All right, great, Adam. And Andrew, I don't know if you had anything to add. I,
No, I think you are very thorough in where to file any noise complaints. Thank you.
all right, that's good. And I'm going to add one more comment, and Andy, hopefully you can verify. Everybody always gets nervous when I just start freewheeling, but headings, has to do with, I mean, that's communication between human beings, right? I mean, it's a pilot controlling the aircraft, it's an air traffic controller giving a heading. There is an element of variability in that. There's timing. These aircraft are moving pretty quickly. So every aircraft's not going to turn at exactly the same point. When we talk about performance-based navigation down the road, satellite-based navigation, now you're really synced up on a procedure that's more precisely defined. And we're not doing that today. But when you think about, I'm not sure the aircraft are going to follow it. It's an evolution in this modernization, and that performance-based navigation really is that pathway that the aircraft wants to fly that's quite precise. So, Andy, are you okay with what I said there?
You did a phenomenal job. Thank you.
Hopefully it was accurate. Thanks. I think we're ready to move on. This one's a little off topic. I may not go real deep on it. It's a John Tune based pilot, and they're wondering how the headings may change operations at John Tune from what they are doing today. So will a pilot departing John Tune see anything different based on the implementation of proposed headings at BNA?
No. Um, no, these proposed headings off of BNA will actually keep airplanes further from John Tune. So there should essentially be little to no impact to John Tune traffic. I'm trying to read the rest of your question here. I'll touch it quickly. Handoffs. Jeremy, you want to finish that question up? I think you can.
Yeah, what it's saying is John Tune Tower, some of the times they feel like John Tune doesn't know that they're coming inbound, and was asking about John Tune's radar. Currently, John Tune does not have a radar. So they are, whenever we have an aircraft that's inbound to John Tune, if it's on an instrument flight rule, it's going to be controlled by us, by Nashville Air Traffic. If they're a visual flight rules, some of the times they're a GA pilot that's just inbound to John Tune. And so it would just be a call up for John Tune, so John Tune wouldn't know that they're coming. Some of the times we can tell them if a visual flight rule aircraft is inbound, but an instrument flight rule aircraft, typically we will give the inbound at about 20 miles from John Tune so that they have an understanding of where that aircraft's at and when they're inbound. But the answer to the question about the radar, they do not have an active radar that they're working with.
All right. Thank you, Jeremy and Andy. Next question, considering the planned growth, what are the plans for noise reduction in the future? Not sure I know the full scope of that. Anybody want to touch on that? Adam, I don't know if that's from an airport perspective or just general efforts to reduce noise.
Sure. Yeah, a couple of ways maybe to answer that, Michael. I think one is, as has been talked about throughout as we've looked at the different graphics, this additional dispersion, these extra on-ramps, if you will, for these airplanes in particular departing, should laterally disperse flights a little bit more broadly than they are today. So on the ground, that should certainly have some positive impacts for some of the communities that otherwise typically see a lot more of that concentrated flight tracks over their community. On the airport side of things, the routine updates of our noise exposure maps is one way of us looking at what that noise footprint looks like in terms of the impact on the immediate surrounding community. There are federal thresholds and guidelines on that, and that kind of line of noise impacts and what's called compatible land use and non-compatible land use does not go very far from the airport as far as one might think. The most recent map was updated in about 2020. It's published on our website. And as I alluded to earlier, we'll be in the process of not only updating that in accordance with that approximately every 5-year update, but more importantly, looking at a broader Part 150 noise program update, which will look at all of those different mitigating measures that might be appropriate. But again, when it comes to communities further from the airport, and especially those outside of what the federal government establishes as compatible land use versus non-compatible, from an airport perspective, there's not any measures we can directly take, but it's programs like these dispersions of flight departure paths that we're talking about tonight, and hopefully in the not too distant future, this performance-based navigation that might allow aircraft to climb higher faster and stay higher longer on arrivals that will provide perhaps the most meaningful benefit from a noise reduction perspective for residents on the ground.
Great answer. Thanks, Adam. Anybody have anything to add? But I'm pondering before I speak, but I mean, the reality is a growing airport and the growing demand for aviation. There's going to be some aviation noise, but I hope what all of the attendees tonight hear is that we're sensitive to that. As Adam just outlined, there are some ways that that can be improved, and in reality, there's some places that obviously are going to hear aircraft noise moving forward. So that's kind of the way it works. I don't say that without empathy. And I know, Andy, you mentioned living in the area, not wanting to hear more yourself. So we're there. We just haven't quite figured out how to make them all silent yet. So I'm not trying to make light of it, but there will be some noise, but hopefully there's some sensitivity to that. Here's a question. They mentioned that they joined late, so they might have missed it. Can we share any information on the long-term plan with runway 1331? I know that's not really the scope of this discussion. Adam, I see you off mute. Anything you want to share on that?
Yeah, so two items may be worth noting, and Jeremy briefly mentioned it earlier, but all of our runways periodically are closed, whether it's for construction, safety area work, whatever it might be. And so 1331 at the moment is closed. It has been closed since November of last year. It's expected to reopen next month just due to airport construction that we've had ongoing. And so from a long-term plan perspective, there is no permanent plans of any sort. The runway, like any of our runways, is subject to being closed for various airfield construction purposes. And so that I couldn't speak to what those look like going forward in the future, but there's no long-term plan for that runway other than it remaining a runway absent closures necessary for construction.
All right. Thanks, Adam. Another question. What will this mean in terms of noise, especially late night flights like the current random one-off 1 a.m. flights?
Michael, I can maybe jump in there briefly on the airport
Please.
side, just to maybe emphasize that what the FAA is looking to change here is departure headings. And just from a scheduled flight perspective, and absent irregular operations due to delayed flights from other parts of the country, subsequently turning late departures, our last scheduled departure here at BNA, with the exception of general aviation or air cargo, is generally around 11 o'clock at night. So if there are flights at 1 or 2 in the morning, either those are arrivals or those are flights that are operating off schedule. And in the case of arrivals, of course, what we're talking about tonight wouldn't apply because these headings are specific to departing aircraft only.
Great, Adam. Thanks. Andrew, anything you want to add from your perspective?
Sure. I'd like to just say that, we're not really expecting the number of aircraft to change as a result. What we did was we looked at the current headings and evaluated the potential noise impacts versus the proposed headings. And what we concluded was that there would be no reportable or I think I mentioned before we used the FAA's approved modeling software, which is ADT, to determine that.
So good point on the analysis, and also, Adam, that these proposed headings really don't affect that one-off flight. So I'll just leave it at that. I know we have some questions, and I'm doing a time check. We're 6:41 Central, and try to keep moving through the questions that have come in. What actions have you taken to minimize the impact on citizens of the increasing traffic? Things like noise pollution, environmental, et cetera. Andrew, anything from your perspective, just in general on that? And anybody else who wants to chime in?
Sure, I'll take a shot first. I don't think we've mentioned yet, but the FAA does work with airframe designers, engine designers. We have some regulations for ensuring that each phase of new aircraft and design has some level of noise reduction wherever appropriate. I think we've talked about optimizing flight paths, move the airplanes in and out of the Nashville area as efficiently as possible. That reduces time in the air and noise. We conduct environmental reviews like the one that we did for this proposed change. And we will do that in the future for all changes as required by NEPA.
So no silver bullet answer really, but trying to move in the right direction, but also recognizing there's increased traffic and there is that safety and efficiency part of the mission that
I don't know if
all
we
of that's
touched
in
on
the
too
mix,
much.
right?
Yeah, and another tool that the controllers are using, maybe they can talk to this, is the continuous descent. Instead of the old style kind of coast and throttle and coast and throttle, the continuous descent seems to be something that is used more widely.
Yeah, if anybody wants to jump in on that, we actually have a question. Is there anything to allow planes to fly more quietly on the approach? Things like throttling down the engine, noting that many people are very concerned about noise on inbound flights. So that may tee that up, Andrew. Andy?
Yeah, sure. As we've talked about the PBN, the performance-based navigation, that's been designed and we're hoping to implement in 26. Trey is a pilot and he can speak more to the technical aspects of this, but the approaches with the aircraft staying higher on arrivals, the idea is for exactly that, or throttling down the engine to allow aircraft to essentially coast in more so than be under power on approach. So I'll let Heidi and Trey speak to the technicalities of how that works.
Thanks, Andy. So when it comes to the approach phase of flight, as you can imagine, it's a very safety critical phase of flight. And where it intertwines with noise generally comes about with where the engines have to be relative to what's called a stabilized approach. And we're required to maintain a criteria for stabilized approach that has airspeed tolerances, sink rate tolerances, and adherence to an angular value to the point that we're planning to touch down on the runway. Now, with that, when it comes to approach design, and this is what segues into these PBN procedures that are being proposed at Nashville, is now I know with the focus of the meeting is on departures, but since the question is relative to approaches, if you design an approach that has a shallow angular value to the threshold crossing height of the runway, then the airplane is going to require more throttle to maintain that. If you design one with a steeper approach angle, then the airplane is going to require less throttle to maintain the stabilized approach criteria. Now, obviously, there's limits to both, right? A too steep approach leads to safety concerns on the approach, but if it's designed properly and optimally, then we're in a sweet spot where noise is mitigated along with safety is also maintained for the aircraft approaching that runway.
Yep, I totally agree with Trey. And I think just from an operational and pilot perspective, we would always rather have this continuous rate descent or optimized profile descent, right? So I think we're looking forward to the next phase of this modernization as much as folks under our flight paths, because again, we want to be good neighbors. We also want to reduce our CO2 emissions. We want to fly quieter. All goals for the pilot community too.
A lot of common goals. Thank you both. I'm trying to keep us moving in view of the time. Here's another question that came in during the Zoom registration. I have very significant concerns about low flying planes below 3,000 feet at Crockett Road, Raintree Parkway. Can you tell us why aircraft are at 3,000 feet near this location, which is about 10 miles south of the airport? Um, Jeremy, you may have some thought on that. Trey, you may as well. We were just in that neighborhood of that conversation. Um,
Yeah, this is another one that you're talking about with the arrivals and not necessarily the departure headings that we have. But from, like the video said, between 8 and 22 miles from Nashville, that would be where we start setting up the arrivals into Nashville. And so there is, they'll have to get Trey can tell you the exact gradient that you have with the 3 degrees inbound into Nashville. But roughly what we want to do is at about that 5 to 8 mile point, we want the aircraft to be at 3,000 feet. Anything outside of that is a little bit higher, but we will turn aircraft onto final at around that 3,000 to 4,000 feet at about the 8 to 15 mile range. But as far as this project goes with the headings, there should not be any more significant. You're not going to see anything different than what you're seeing today.
I'll give a little, maybe getting too deep here, but I'll give it another shot. Your question is planes below 3,000 and at 3,000 in that area. So I've pulled up the approach plate. Approach plate is what a pilot uses. It's kind of like their roadmap for the final approach course. And there are fixes, we call them fixes on the final approach course, and they're basically arbitrary points in space that have a name. And those points in space around your area, Loretta and Jackson, and aircraft are required to cross that fix, Jackson, JCKSN, at 3,000 feet. And then they start their final descent into Nashville from there. And so that's a procedural thing. It's not new. There likely is more frequency of it since we have an increase in volume, but it's not a new thing. It's been around for a really long time. Hopefully that answers your question.
We mentioned stable approach earlier, so that there are altitudes that we use the phraseology like that the plane wants to be at, but that you're on a stable approach there's safety, there's also the passenger comfort, if you will, but there's an approach angle that's pretty standard at most airports that puts you roughly in that range at 10 miles. So that doesn't sound uncommon to me, but I'm going to move us because there's another somewhat related question. I live 20 miles south of the airport. Why can't you turn these planes in closer to the airport? So we may come back on the same round again, but I'll tee it up a little bit, but a lot of times it has to do with volume and how many people are in line. But Jeremy, you want to start with that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Especially with the volume in Nashville, when we have a significant amount of arrivals, we have to take them outside of the 5 mile point. We have to take them outside to closer. They also have to be, like we talked about earlier, they have to be established at certain points, generally about that 8 to 10 mile range the aircraft wants to be established. But as far as sequencing goes, when we have those big arrival banks, those final approaches, those bases to final, they're going to be farther out than that, kind of like Andy described and Michael described as well.
Hopefully that was clear enough. I don't know if anybody wants to add, but I used an analogy in a prior conversation that, if there are 10 people in line ahead of you, you're basically headed to a different place to get in line in the 11th spot than you are if you're headed to the ticket counter or the whatever you're in line for. So it's not unlike that with aircraft. You have folks in front of you, think Friday afternoon or Thursday evening, a busier time. When you have more aircraft in line, you're flying to a point a little further out to get in line and you're going to be stacked up. So maybe you've seen that looking out at the airport. I know I see that here. I'm actually looking out the window at Atlanta. So I see aircraft stacked up out there live as we speak. Let me keep us moving. Hopefully that was helpful. You showed us Smyrna Airport. I live near there, and we see a lot of the small airplanes flying in the same places all the time. Why do they do this? Um, Interesting, not directly tied again with the workshop, but Heidi, do you want to take a shot at that?
Sure. I'm sure Jeremy can jump in and add to it, but pretty typical for GA aircraft around an outlying airport like Smyrna to be flight training, right? And so they could be circling and practicing maneuvers. They could be conducting traffic pattern operations. So you see them going in a circle, right? That could be arriving and departing that runway over and over to practice landings. Or any other type of maneuver. We're required to do a certain amount of training to hone our skills and as we gain certificates and maintain our flight proficiency. So they're doing things that we are called to do. We often around a smaller flight training airport like that will have practice areas where we conduct those maneuvers. So you'll see maybe a predominance of aircraft at lower altitude in those areas. That's all very routine, but also very necessary for us to maintain our skill set and build skill set. So Jeremy, I don't know if you have anything else to add there.
The only thing that I could probably add, because I couldn't do any better than that, would be Smyrna is in a unique place. With Smyrna, you have Murfreesboro right down the road, which MTSU, Middle Tennessee State University, has a very robust, I guess you would say, pilot program where they're training pilots. And in that Murfreesboro area, there's 2 or 3 more flight schools there. There's a flight school at Lebanon. Smyrna being the unique perspective is that they have a control tower. And so one of the curriculums for that airport or for pilot training in general is to be able to talk to an operational control tower. So you're going to see a significant amount of traffic in the area between Smyrna, Lebanon, and Murfreesboro for that reason also.
That great answer. Thank you both. And thanks for the question. We've got another one. How likely is it? This one's related to future activity with PBN. How likely is it that the planes on approach remain higher for longer once the performance-based navigation or PBN, kind of that second phase, is implemented? And what might we expect for an altitude at 10 miles out? That may be for you, Andy, Jeremy. Trey, you might have some input. Anybody want to jump on that one?
I can kick us off. Planes will be higher longer when the performance-based navigation is implemented. The exact altitudes, I can speak to where actually I'm going to have a hard time doing it without getting too deep in the weeds technically. Planes will currently aircraft joining a downwind, if you know anything about aviation, will cross a beam the Nashville airport or laterally either side of the Nashville airport joining the downwind. They will join at 8,000 instead of what they currently do, which is 5,000. So they'll start out much higher and they'll have that opportunity to coast, as Trey and Heidi were speaking about earlier, to be quieter. As far as where they're going to be at 10 miles out, I presume that's the Crockett Road area again. I don't recall, Jeremy, do you recall, or do we even know yet what those approach fix altitudes or crossing altitudes are going to be?
Not currently. We're still in development stages of those.
Yeah. So to answer your question, I don't know. I don't know at 10 miles out how much higher airplanes will be. I just know that in general, the flight path from initial approach in will be higher, starting at 3,000 feet higher.
That's helpful. And I'll jump in there. I know as we get information on the PBN project, again, if you become familiar with the FAA's community engagement site. There is a link for Nashville, and you'll be able to find more information on that as we know that. So that's probably the best we can do on that tonight. Another question I've noticed, we're getting close to the end. I'm not sure we're going to hit the top of the hour, but we're already 85 minutes into our 60-minute Q&A. I've noticed that when some planes land, some of them have extremely loud landing gear noises. It's like a screeching noise. How can that be addressed? With the airlines question, or can the airport have a standard on maintenance for things that cause noise? Interesting question. I don't know if anybody wants to jump in or has a perspective on that.
Michael,
Well,
I'll just briefly. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, Adam, you can go ahead if you want to.
I want you to hit it from the pilot perspective, because I think that largely addresses it, and I can just speak to airport regulation of that type of noise.
Sure. I really can attest to a screeching noise. What my assumption is, based on what I heard with the question, was that a landing gear noise is probably the aircraft's thrust reversers. And that's essentially where we use a function of the engine to, once we've touched down on the runway, the engines do increase their thrust setting, but in a directed and reverse fashion in order to increase aerodynamic braking to decelerate the aircraft. That is, at least in our case, a standard procedure for the landing rollout. And we do receive credit for reduced landing distances. Again, another flight safety measure. But that's just my assumption. Screeching, it doesn't really make a screeching noise that I'm aware of. It's just more of a generalized thrust sound.
Yeah, and Trey, I'll just jump in as a observer and someone who's spent time on airfields next to runways. I think I'm familiar with the screeching sound they're referring to. It's more of a kind of a high-pitched sound when the gear first touches down, and typically, at least from just observation, not a pilot, is that's the gear spinning up very rapidly, which generally could mean the airplane touched down a little bit harder, and those wheels spun up faster can create a little bit of a unique sound before those reversers turn on. So that's either that or just maybe more active braking on the part of the pilot as soon as they touch down on maybe a shorter runway, or as Trey mentioned, if they've got a shorter landing distance. That I have personally seen that be the case. To the latter part of the question on whether the airport has a standard for things that create noise, our noise standard falls under the federal threshold for noise, which is 65 dNL. That's what's established under Part 150, that study that we've talked about a few times. As far as regulating that screeching noise, again, that has to do with airplanes doing what they're supposed to do, which is to land safely and brake where necessary. So it is not regulated by airports, and I'm not aware of any airport that does.
All right. Thank you both for that. I think we covered it. I'm going to do two sort of quick questions and then close us out with a final. Jeremy, I may just throw this your way. What are the different air traffic facilities? We talked about towers and TRACONs in the video. Do you want to touch on kind of the third key facility real quick, just for folks who may not be aware of kind of those phases of flight?
Yeah, I think it all kind of goes together, though. The tower, like I said earlier, is about 5 miles from Nashville, or 5 miles in a large area where the airport is. Outside of 5 miles and about 4,000 feet, the approach control will take over, which is the TRACON at Nashville. That'll go out to roughly 35 miles. Here at Nashville, we own up to 15,000 feet. And then anything outside of that, I always like to say, whenever you leave 10,000 feet, the pilot makes the dinging noise, and then the flight attendants are able to get up and serve. That's where the air route traffic control centers take over, and they handle the en route phase of flight. Once you get back closer to the destination airport, at about that 40-mile point out, that's whenever you're handed back off to a TRACON at your arriving facility, and then the tower for your landing.
A great explanation. I know a lot of different people you talk to. You're not just on with one controller. So you talk kind of up and through centers and then back down, do it in reverse. So those are the three. Thanks, Jeremy. Um, last question I think that came in is the airspace being adjusted and are SIDS and are the standard instrument departures or SIDS being affected? Um, Andy, Jeremy, you want to kick us off with that and maybe delineate between headings and future?
We'll take a shot at it here. The airspace, plans to adjust the airspace for operational necessity and safety. They'll continue to be examined. B&A continues to grow. Our processes and procedures will grow. They'll just have to keep growing with it. So there have been discussions about airspace change, expansion, things of that nature, but nothing. Well, Jeremy, help me out here. We have some ideas of airspace expansion. I'm not sure what a timeline looks like as of yet. Are you aware?
We're still waiting on the timeline to expand it out to make it to where we can control aircraft in and out of Nashville safer. The SIDS are going to be SIDS and STARS are going to be. I talked about that quite a bit today, but that is an essential part of this. The headings that we're doing off of Nashville make it to where they'll join as a departure off of Nashville. Will be on a more predictable route when the SIDS come along. So you'll know exactly where the aircraft are going to go. They will come off of Nashville. They will join a SID immediately off of Nashville. So there'll be less controller input, and then the aircraft will fly on to points to join their route en route to their destination airport. So the plans. What you see now is the headings is the initial phase, and it makes it more predictable for the air traffic controller, but it also makes it to where the community will understand where that flight is going to take them and what the anticipated headings will be once the SIDS come along.
That was an excellent.
Andy, anything you wanted to add? Sorry.
No, I was just saying.
Okay. No.
Excellent.
So procedures that Jeremy was talking about are really that pathway that the airplane's flying. And there was a question about airspace, but for everybody who's not living in the aviation world, you can just think of that as a volume that has a set of rules and standards to it. The airspace for Nashville has a set of rules and separation, and it's designed to keep aircraft coming in and out of the busier airports apart from those that may be following visual flight rules. So the procedures are really different from the airspace. There were some changes to the airspace in the last couple of years. And as Jeremy said, I think we're always looking at what is the airspace that would be the safest for the demand and the needs there. So there could be future changes, but no timelines at this point. I think that's accurate. All right, so the final question for panelists, we've talked a lot tonight about the increase in operations, some about congestion, how the facilities operate, what our different roles are. As we've seen the growth in the Nashville Tower from level 9 to 10, let me ask if each of you could just share a little bit again on your roles as a stakeholder, what it means to contribute to making our airspace the safest in the world. And I'll just look to see, Adam, you look like you're ready to go.
Yeah, no, thank you, Michael. I appreciate you and the FAA and the attendees that have been on with us tonight. So short answer is the Airport Authority takes exceptionally seriously our responsibilities, first and foremost, to provide a safe experience for every user of this airport, whether you're driving in and out of the airport or you're flying on an aircraft. That is always going to be mission number one. But we're also an economic engine for the community, for Middle Tennessee and beyond. And so aside from making sure that we are supportive of important efforts to make things like airspace safer and more efficient, we're laser focused on making sure that we're building the very best airport that we could possibly build for the community that we serve and the passengers that come through our airport. So all of that, again, with safety in mind. It's exciting times for Middle Tennessee. The growth that we've seen doesn't seem to be slowing down, and we've got a lot of work to do. But it's partnerships like these, and it's more importantly the engagement with our community that helps to make that successful.
Thanks so much, Adam. I'm going to call on everybody. So Heidi, jump in. Thanks.
Sure. So thanks, Michael, and thanks for having us on. I think This is a key part of the continued success and modernization of our airspace and our system as a whole, right? It takes collaboration amongst all the stakeholders, from the airports to the service providers to those of us who are operating the aircraft, as well as the community. And this is a really key piece of that, right? It's that community engagement, wanting to make sure that we understand one another and we continue to try to be good neighbors. And I think this is just one part of that broader space that we all have committed to continue to collaborate, continue to communicate, and to continue to educate our each of our environments and communities.
So true. Thanks, Heidi. Andy?
Yeah, this group, I would say, has been working together for quite some time now, individually and as a holistic group towards improving things for the greater Nashville resident. Nashville's such a high demand place to be. We all live in such a wonderful place, and that's a large reason why the volume here has increased so rapidly. So with that volume and that increase, this panel, this group of people has come together to try and increase the safety of that volume, increase the efficiency for the user, and reduce noise as much as we can to make it a better place for all of us to live. And your controller workforce, I want to let you know, are extremely service oriented. They want to provide a safe, efficient service, not just to the flying public, but the controller workforce lives here also. So we experience the same things that you're experiencing. And I want to get that message across and let you know that we're doing the best that we can do for you in addition to the flying public.
Thanks, Andy. Jeremy?
Yeah, I can echo pretty much everything that Andy said. He said it so eloquently. On behalf of the air traffic controllers, we want to make this airspace the most safe, efficient, but like everyone else has said, since we live in this, as Adam Burchard says, Heidi says, we live in this ecosystem together. So we want to make sure that we're good neighbors. We want to make sure that we have a safe environment for all who participate in this environment as air travel expands into Nashville. Thank you, everyone, for inviting us to this panel.
Thanks, Jeremy. Andrew, anything for the group?
I'll just add that it really is a team effort. Appreciate all the good questions tonight. I am involved as the environmental protection specialist throughout design, so I'm not just fed a bunch of procedures and then take a look. I'm actually in the room while they're being designed. We try to mitigate, urban areas or heavily concentrated housing developments, things like that. So we do look at the ground when we design procedures, and it's great to be a part of the team and make sure that we're taking care of the public when we do this.
Thanks, Andrew. And Trey, I think you're the last one.
No problem. Thank you. From an air carrier perspective, we have been in close contact with Nashville, both on the airport side and the air traffic side, as we are with all of the facilities that we serve. And we monitor the changes, whether they be on the ground or with the airspace system. We disseminate the information to our pilots so that they can be aware of what's going on and have good situational awareness throughout whatever phase they're in of a particular flight. We do very much care about our communities. Whether you've bought a ticket on Southwest or another air carrier, we still care. We do care about the noise and the environmental impacts, and we want to be good stewards of your city's airspace to the absolute best of our abilities. And we do appreciate the opportunities to answer your questions tonight and be an active and engaged member of this panel. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Trey. And it does take a village. That brings us to the close of the workshop. I want to thank everyone who attended tonight. We ran a little bit longer maybe than we expected, but hopefully the information that we provided was useful. We got a lot of great questions. So thanks to everybody who hung with us, who asked the questions, who gave us the opportunity to share our various experiences, whether it was Heidi and Trey from the operator perspective. Adam, thank you for representing the airport, and certainly Jeremy and Andy for all that you do to keep the flying public safe there in Nashville, and Andrew for your analysis work on this, as you highlighted. Thanks to you all. Thanks to the FAA team behind us, supporting us. A lot of expertise shared tonight. I hope it was informative to everyone who participated from the Nashville area. Again, you can visit the FAA's community engagement webpage, and you'll find more information about Nashville there today and moving forward at the Nashville International Airport and the surrounding airspace. So that's all that we have for you tonight. It's been our privilege to spend the evening with everyone who participated. My honor to moderate with such a great panel, and I hope everybody has a great evening. Thank you.